From the crazy, sexy, and cool days of TLC to the sultry and sensual sangin EnVogue, an influx of 90s R&B female groups was more in demand than Tamagotchi, bombarding their way into the industry as well as our airwaves. For one group in particular, Jade, they were able to rise from the pits of music's manufactured trenches and went on to have one of 1992's biggest hits. But like most inventions particularly crafted solely to sell a product, things weren't all cracked up to be what they had hoped for, and the group would soon fade out of obscurity almost as fast as they had entered. Shady music execs, label drama, and a broiling feud within the group would ultimately lead to Jade's demise. But fans want to know the real force behind the madness and why group member Jade has been handing out cease and desist like free church pamphlets. We all remember the days when R&B groups took the world by storm. The oh-so-carefree days of the 90s when you and your homegirls or homeboys got into heated debates about who was better, Boyz II Men or Jodeci. The boys or men may have had things on lock for quite a bit, but the R&B girls came crashing in like a wave in Hawaii, giving us a tsunami of well-rounded talents to vibe to. Although some, if not most groups didn't have as much luck as an SWV or even a Destiny's Child, they were able to catapult their careers and utilize their talents under mainstream light. Somewhat. Falling under the category of groups that could have been bigger than what they were, girl group Jade was on the brink of becoming the next TLC or SWV. Carefully orchestrated and strategically placed together, members Joy Marshall, Tanya Kelly, and Jade set out on a mission to become the next big thing. Young, wild, and manufactured? Plucked and penned by their label, Giant Records, president of the Black Music Division, Cassandra Mills. Cassandra, along with record producer Vassal Benford, set out a plan to concoct a girl group that would be a mixture of TLC's youthful, street-savvy image and the mature glam of EnVogue, thus Jade's evolution. Well, without the E, that is. Jade had been reeled in, observed, and chucked right back into the music deep abyss before the origin of JADE took place. Originally consisting of Joy Marshall and singers Angela Slates and Deborah Mitchell, the group was set and ready to go, except there was just one major problem. Their music was already set in stone and ready to be recorded in the studio, except that producer Vassal had already sold what was supposed to be the group's breakout hit, I Wanna Love You, with a demo already pre-recorded for the soundtrack to the Kid and Play film class act. In order to keep the song on the soundtrack, Vassal would have to reproduce the song with the original voices on the demo track. Money over everything seemed to be the motto for Giant Records, because with the quickness, two of the group's members, Angela and Deborah, were dropped like a hot pocket and replaced by the original singers on the track, Jade and Tanya Kelly, who had already been signed to Vassal's production company prior. JAD would cease to exist, but the name itself served to be useful. Instead of adding Di or Tanya's initials to the group's domain, Vassal thought it'd be best to keep the original JAD and add an E just because. The group without a doubt was brought in and handcrafted by the label itself, calculating Joy, Di, and Tanya's stint within the business solely to be used as a cash cows for their label. As expected, requirements were summoned, and for Jade, it was all about making sure each member was the same size and had the potential to be the Beyoncé of the group. Prior to Tanya Kelly taking on her new role as a third of the newly established trio, born and bred in the Chi, she grew up engulfed in jazz melodies, listening to jazz musicians like Sarah Vaughan and Nat King Cole. Similar to her group mate, Joy Marshall had also been raised in Chicago. But contrary to Tanya, her musical genre preference was rooted in Motown. Jade, on the other hand, was an H-Town baby with a taste for gospel, belting out church hymns whenever and wherever she could. Unlike most groups who established a friendship prior to signing a major record deal, Jade's success was already pre-planned. obtaining their first major big breakout with their song I Wanna Love You for the Class Act movie. The song went on to top the top 10 of the R&B charts, reaching number 16 on Billboard's Hot 100. The success didn't stop there, and Jade's career was up and stuck. For the meanwhile, that is. Their follow-up bop, Don't Walk Away, went on to become the group's biggest hit to date, becoming a contender in R&B's Best Song of All Time category, and served as the ringtone to your nostalgic 1992 summer nights. Scaling the R&B charts and jumping to the second position, the single went on to sell over 1.5 million copies worldwide, knocking their initial single, I Wanna Love You, out of the park. But not over the pond, since I Wanna Love You was practically the group's trial run and didn't quite gain international recognition since it wasn't pushed as a worldwide release. Don't Walk Away, on the other hand, just knew she was the one to gain the group international popularity. It would eventually tick the certified gold status the following year, and Jade was now at the prime of their peak relevancy as a trio. The group were having a blast as the next best up-and-coming act, going on tour with fellow groups and getting an up-close and personal experience with Hollywood life. Folks they haven't seen in years and men who wouldn't give them a second glance prior to being in the group were now blowing up Joy, Tanya, and Di's hotlines more than a bill collector. And the girls were thriving, making appearances at prestigious events and performing at shows and ceremonies like the Apollo. With their album Jade to the Max steadily brewing, they go on to release a couple more singles like One Woman and Mr. Do Right, which helped propel their debut album to platinum status upon its release. Frequent television appearances became the norm for Jade. The Tonight Show, the Arsenio Hall Show, and the UK's Top of the Pops make up just a few. While they were away doing what they do best, Jade were not only making rounds, they were also making history. Performing at BET's Listening Party Live, the recorded session was released as a CD and had been the only group in BET's struggle history to do so. A few short years after blowing up, thanks to a movie soundtrack, they'd find themselves working for another movie. This time, in the actual film The Inkwell. Their second studio album, Mind, Body, and Song, were in the works. This time, Joy, Tanya, and Di got to put on their writer and producer hats, the label now giving them leeway to do their own thing. Although the album was a vibe to say the least, it didn't do as well as their first. But thanks to their singles 5, 4, 3, 2, Yo, Time Is Up, and Every Day of the Week, the body of work did eventually make gold. The girls were doing well, but truth be told, after the release of Don't Walk Away, the group's popularity began to dwindle, and so did their interest in the business. Let Tanya Kelly tell it, after the first year of Jade's success, their journey within the music industry began to feel more and more like a job, which sucked the fun out of what was originally supposed to be a good time. On top of the business side of things, putting a damper on their expectations, similar to TLC's story, Jade's finances were being tampered with, and the girls weren't seeing a dime of their hard-earned coins, even after selling millions of copies. The experience overall just wasn't a good time anymore, and the group found themselves between a rock and a hard place. In the year 1995, Tanya Kelly left the group altogether. She was gone like the wind, but not too fast, because 2 years after she chucked the deuces up and had a flight scheduled to anywhere but here, she reunited with her girls in '97 to lend her vocals on Keep On Rising, a song for a movie soundtrack, The Sixth Man, along with fellow groups SWV, TLC, Escape, and more. Soundtracks seemed to be the go-to shortcut for the group to potentially revive their popularity, because they'd also record their song Freedom, which appeared on the 1995 film Panther. Despite giving it their all and working vigorously for 3+ years, the group would be forced to abandon their careers after their label decided to revamp and tell everyone still on board to make like a tree and leave. Roughly 50% of Giant's staff had been fired, and Jade would be dropped just like that, with nothing to show for, except a few hit singles under their belt and a crushed spirit. Unable to pay her own rent, Joy Marshall ended up getting a 9-to-5 in a law department of an entertainment company in hopes of helping others not make the same mistakes she had made in the music business. Her knowledge or lack thereof of the financial side of the music industry and overall contractual duties was a large factor that separated her from her dreams, and she'd make it her mission to make sure other aspiring musicians knew what they were getting themselves into. Her book, Answers to the 20 Most Asked Questions About the Music Business, was published in 2004, and she eventually launched a solo career and dropped a gospel-inspired album in 2007. Tanya Kelly sought out her inner luxury interior designing dreams and recorded music for Disney soundtracks. Di Reed was still knee-deep in her music bag and got the opportunity to sing backup for Rod Stewart, Christina Aguilera, Stevie Wonder, Smokey Robinson, and more. The group was out and about on their own solo endeavors for years after the initial split, but that didn't mean Jade was extinct. 2013 would be the year that Jade yearned to re-enter the music side as a union. Joy and Tanya decided to get together and hit up Di for a mini reunion. But to their dismay, Di was booked and too busy on tour with Rod Stewart, prompting Tanya and Joy to recoup another woman, Miracle Holloway, who had been a former runner-up contestant on NBC's The Voice. Miracle was not only used as a stand-in for Di, but at this point, she was dang near a part of the squad, having released a song along with Joy and Tanya, Baby Love, in 2014. Di didn't like this one bit, but she was a little too busy getting them checks from Rod Stewart and them, so she let it slide for some time. That time came to a halt in 2019 when Di took it upon herself to renew the Jade trademark and made sure to not leave her girls hanging, adding Tanya as well as Joy as co-owners, making all three girls legally permitted to use the Jade name. A few short years later, the girls again decided to reach out to Di, who they claimed was unresponsive. Di, on the other hand, said, she's telling lies, Your Honor, because apparently it had been Miss Tanya who originally reached out and confided in Di Reed that she, being Tanya, was tired of harmonizing with Joy. Di was fine with reuniting without Joy and even spent her days sharing ideas and plans with Tanya only. Long and behold, the 90s Kickback was set to premiere in 2021, and when the event's flyer came circulating in Di Reed's inbox, she was not here for the foolishness. Tanya, Joy, and Miracle Holloway were listed as Jade's members. Attempting to reach out to her fellow groupmates, Tanya and Joy both ignored Di's calls like a bad ex, and all of her attempts to get in touch went unnoticed. A loophole was somehow established so that Joy and Tanya could use the group name without Di being attached to it. But Di wanted to be a part of her group's comeback. After finding out about Jade's, minus Di, little promo tour, Di reached out to the promoter, who left her on red, urging Di to send a cease and desist in order to halt Joy and Tanya's involvement with the promo company. It was evident from here on out that things were getting messy, and I ain't talking about little spilled milk. I'm talking chicken grease on the sofa messy. Di allegedly dialed up anyone linked to Jade in hopes of stopping them from doing gigs without her. Radios, as well as Joy and Tanya's agents and managers, felt the wrath of Di Reed, who was even more furious when the group went ahead with their scheduled performances. Jade was soon hit with a civil lawsuit in December of 2021, claiming that Joy, Tanya, Miracle, and their promotion company were not giving Di her fair share of profits earned and intentionally misused the Jade trademark. Joy and Tanya hit Di with that Uno reverse and filed a countersuit claiming Di's smear campaign resulted in their promoters ceasing any further business with them. Currently, the girls are still filing and refiling lawsuits, and the suits have yet to be settled in or out of court. Jade was a musical test dummy constructed by higher-ups at a now-defunct music label, but their willful obligations to the group never died. On the contrary, given these lawsuits, their trust for each other has definitely gone down the toilet, and it looks like we'll just have to wait and see how things turn out. I guess it's to be expected when your friendship was based on a get-rich-quick scheme and not rooted in a genuine connection and love for the arts. Are you Team Di? Team Joy and Tanya or Team Jade? Let us know your thoughts and opinions down below in the comments. And stay tuned for more true celebrity stories.